guys, welcome back. So it is finally time to get the 55 back together.
Can't wait.
It's been a long time coming, very long time coming, because last June we hurt the motor in it.
I couldn't even remember how long it's been. I really don't even want to know.
It's been a while. So if you guys remember, the engine that was in the 55 was out of your Nova. And we had intentions of having this motor that you're going to see here together last year.
Yep.
That didn't happen.
Like all good plans.
That didn't happen. And then when we hurt the one in the car, well, when we hurt that, we didn't have a spare, and it honestly kept us from racing the second half of last year.
Yep.
So we have a new plan. We're going to have a spare. And you get your motor back for the Nova once it's fixed.
So 2 more besides this one.
Yeah.
A spare and mine.
Well, I was going to say.
So the spare can be from my Nova as well.
Well, sure. So we thought we would show you guys what our combination is for the 55. It's still fairly simple.
It's very simple. It's really not any different, just a little bit better.
Yeah, just a little bit better parts, but very similar combination. Technically, that one can still function as a spare for this. It's just, it's time for the Nova to have its motor back. Mm-hmm. So let's get to showing you all the goodies behind us. So one of the hardest parts of all this was getting a block. That was not fun.
But it kind of turned out not to be a hard part.
It didn't. So we always had dart block. You've had more dart blocks. Had it in the Camaro, 55, the Nova, whatever. And
you intended on doing a billet block at first.
We actually went back and forth. So we were kind of trying to decide. We were like, because this is a simple combination that was in there, just cast iron, big block, Chevy block, conventional, very simple. We're like, well, we might as well go ahead and make it really complicated. We actually had that discussion.
Well, like a max effort big block.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as you think.
But we talked about doing like a billet block, and we talked about doing all these different things, but we don't really need it right now.
No, and the problem, so billet block, as we learned, there's not anything with a water jacket in a billet block for a 484 bore space, standard bore space big block Chevy. So there's just not a water block for it. So that was the first issue. And then, so we considered doing a cast aluminum block, but I don't feel good about that. I don't feel
good at that. So we went back and forth. So one, we were like, well, let's build a motor for that billet block one. We're like, let's build something that we can grow with. If we want to build another car, then we'll take that motor. But realistically, even if we build another car, or when we build another car, we're not gonna take the 55's motor out. The 55 will stay together. So this motor will make the power that we can for our 650 cert on the 55.
Yeah.
So that kind of took the billet block out, which was nice. It's a lot cheaper. And then, like we said, we talked about cast aluminum. The one that we thought we were gonna go with wasn't available. Then we were back to the drawing board once we hurt the motor. We found that out in June, and we thought we were gonna go with a dart block.
We planned on it.
That was a 9-month lead time.
We just waited and waited and waited. No.
Yep. So we ended up, I called Scott Taylor, and he hooked us up with, we worked with Summit, as you know, from the 55 and things like that, but Scott actually put us in contact with one of his guys at Summit who is really great at sourcing parts, and he called World, and they had blocks in stock.
Yep, and I'm really impressed with it.
Yeah, we're very, very happy, and so far everything we've heard, Scott, we took the block over to Mike Henson. He machined it, and everybody's very happy with the finish from the factory. And they do some stuff like the mains, the dowel pins.
Yeah, they're already like dowel pin. That's a big deal because it takes me hours to do that.
Yeah, so we're really happy with the block. But once we found out we could go with the World, those are in stock.
But that wasn't just the block. The block was an issue, so were crankshafts.
Yeah. So, and one more thing, we actually got the block, and it delivered, and then Dad was sending me pictures and opened it and figured out one of the forklift drivers somewhere in transportation
right in a cylinder
drove a fork into the cylinder wall. So we had to send that one back.
I didn't even actually have to open it. It just, the pallet kind of fell apart. The cardboard box was just pieces.
Yeah.
It was kind of rough treated.
Yeah, so anyways, this is our block. We're really excited about it. Dad did have to do a lot of clearancing on this because we're not going with a steel rod. We're actually going with aluminum rods, and those are, so you'll see, those are some big suckers.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, more stroke and bigger rods, so it's to be expected.
So real quick, give some details on this block, and like it's going to be a little bit bigger engine combination than the one that was in there, so you can talk about that.
There's not a lot different in the block. Actually, this, if you turn your back, I might steal it and put all my stuff in it. It's exactly the same as mine. So it's 4-bolt main, but like we say, the main caps are dowel pinned, which I really like, because at this power level, one of the things you got to worry about is cap walk, because you're trying to shove that crankshaft out of the bottom, and there's thousands of pounds of pressure on each one of these cylinders. So having the main caps not just located with a bolt and a register out here, but having the dowel pins stops that cap walk a lot. So they already did that. That's really nice. Everything else is basically the same. It's a 4.5-inch bore, and I mean exactly 4.5 inch. That's the way we set it up. We didn't bore it out anymore. We give more cubic inches, but in our world, we just turn the boost up.
And keep in mind, that's something that we are trying to do, is we still have a streetable race car, and it has to go for a lot of miles, and so it's finding that balance of compression and size mixed with turbo, what's efficient and all that, where it works on the track and also on the street. So some of the stuff that isn't necessarily the conventional way of making
a race
horsepower race car, we have to take in considerations that make it streetable as well.
You know how much time we have in learning that? So we get these things all the time. Building a 3,000 horsepower drag and drive car. Well, that's not really that hard to do. These are just very simple parts. But what's hard is to make it live.
Yeah.
And knowing the combination of what to get. And that's what we've learned the hard way.
We were actually talking the other day, if we looked back at what we've gone through in the last 10 years of learning all this, that'd be hard to restart.
I don't want to do it again.
That would hurt. That would hurt a lot.
It's like finishing a project like the Isky Roadster. I look back at pictures like, man, I'm glad I'm not having to start that over. I don't want to relearn what we've learned. It's been a long process.
It has. And there's a lot more information out there now. But anyway, so this is our block. Very happy with this. I'll put a link in the description for this block from Summit. Don't sell them out. I don't want another one at the moment, but well, I kind of do. Just don't sell them out. Nice block here. So took that over. Like I said, Dad did a lot of work on this before we took it to Henson, but Mike Henson got it and did all the finish on it, got everything balanced and all that. So
Mike decked it and final honed it to the piston size, because it comes 4.495 bore, so 5 thousandths under, and he honed it and set it up for our Race Tech pistons. And then we do something unconventional. I know nobody else that does this, but this is Mike Henson's deal, and I was so impressed with it on our last motor. We did it on this one as well. If you notice, it's got O-rings in the block. That's not that big a deal, but if you also notice, it's got O-rings in the heads. Oh my goodness, what's up with that? That's just crazy. That's unheard of. That's stupid. So I get the question all the time when I tell them it's double O-ring. Are they offset? They're actually stacked on top of each other.
Yep.
Every other, so you can do hoops, but when you do a top fuel hoop, you usually put it in the head, and then you cut this massive groove in the block. So I really don't want to do that.
Yeah, you're screwing up the deck and everything.
Yeah, so it's anything you do is potential problems for fixing it later on. But the top fuel hoops have a receiver groove in the block and a top fuel hoop in the head. The only real difference, as far as I'm concerned, is you don't have a place where the O-rings butt together, like right there. We have never, ever seen any seepage from the crack in an O-ring. I think that's really taken the splitting hairs. So what I have seen, even with top fuel hoops, black in here, where you're having combustion transfer because you've got an O-ring groove, and I just don't like that. I like this. Yep. We compress these gaskets. This is a 62 thousandths, is that right, or 64?
I think we went with, I can't remember, 62,000.
62, and it'll put a dent on both sides of that. And this gasket, when we take it apart, I have never seen it black. It's so perfect sealed.
So it's one of those things we actually discussed, should we go to the top fuel hoop? Should we consider changing it up? But it's one of those things. If it's working,
it works.
Let's not fix it. And we actually are, now that we're getting into a higher horsepower range, we are finding some nuances where it's like, all right, we haven't been at that point. We do have to make some minor changes here and there because we're coming into some territory that we haven't been in. We can talk more about that later. But this is one of those things. It works. And so we went back with it. And
Yep.
that's,
Because we're comfortable with it. I don't want to make it put a top fill hoop and then see black and wish I had
yeah,
done this.
and the goal with all of this is that we want to put it together and we want to be able to take it out and test it. We don't want a brand new, totally crazy combination that we're not going to be comfortable with tune-wise and just, you know, our own comfort level.
For no more
of
than we
building.
need.
Yeah, we're not trying to get, you know, an exponential increase in horsepower. We just need a little more.
Yep.
A little
We
more.
were on our way there.
Yeah.
We could have done it with the old combo.
So now some good stuff. So this, like I said, this motor has been in the works for a long time, and the very first thing that was on the shelf for this, and something that's glad to be going on, are these 8FR 18-degree Magnum heads. You've had those how long on the Nova motor?
Man, I can't even
I was
imagine.
trying to
5
think
or
of
6
that.
years?
It's got to be.
They were one of the first sets that they did.
Yeah.
And I have yet to touch a valve seat in those.
Yep.
I've replaced the valves once, maybe twice, just for safety. But every time I do, the valve seats are still perfect.
Yeah, these are, I mean, very, very happy with these heads, which is exactly why they're going, you know, on this new motor. So we got 2 sets now, one for him, one for me. And then we ran AFR heads on a ton of different stuff. Had it on my LS and the Camaro, different things like that, but really, really happy with these. You can give some specs on those.
The thing with this is they're box stock, other than that O-ring.
Yep.
And I've opened up the pushrod holes because we run a massive pushrod.
And you've just O-ringed them, that's it.
Yeah, O-ring, the exhaust ports, exactly. I've O-ringed the exhaust ports, and that's the only way to travel. So other than that, they're very basic box stock heads. They're raised
off the
runner.
shelf.
Yep, they're raised runners, so they're 457 cc's in these runners, which sounds massive. It's not as massive as you think because part of that runner is actually in this raised section because most heads are, you know, this is across here. So it's whatever it is, a 1/2 inch raised runner or something. So, but it is a 457. It's only got a 90 cc chamber, which I like. That's kind of like, I guess you'd call that a closed chamber. But that keeps the chamber small and the piston can be more flat top to get the compression without having to have as big a dome on it, which interrupts flame travel. So I really like it. The copper beryllium seats, I'll never do anything else ever. That
And this
works
is
so
one of
good.
those that it worked well, and
Leaving it alone.
Leaving it alone. It's something that we've had time to test with it. That also goes back to valves. Tried a little bit of different stuff on valves, early last year.
Yeah.
We have tie intake
coated
valves.
tie intake valves.
And then over here, we have Inconel exhaust valves. And we swapped that around last year. I think that was just because of availability.
Well, we didn't swap. We actually
Not
replaced
swap, but
those.
yeah, replaced
Instead of those, we used coated titanium exhaust valves on it. I don't remember exactly, but I don't want them in our combo.
Well, with what I believe that's when we took it out, we had a little bit of tulip on the tie valves, partly because the combination just wasn't, you know, like the tune, it wasn't happy when we had it out, but we have had a lot more resilience.
Those have never, ever failed. The difference being, why wouldn't everybody use them? Because they're heavy.
heavy.
But honestly, I mean, again, it's 7,500 horsepower. I mean, 7,500 RPM, maybe 8,000. That's not a problem.
Yeah. So again, that could be, you know, we're just doing
What we know.
what we found that we like, and that's keeping it simple, stupid. Isn't
That's
that
like
the whole
bulletproof.
thing?
That's
Yeah.
bulletproof. This coated intake valve is so perfect. With that coating, you can actually see the coating where it stops on that valve. It's not a DLC, which is diamond light coating, but it's something like that. I don't know if Victor uses their own. I'm not real sure. It's not DLC, but it's very much like it. The seat just never gets beat up. They stay perfect. I replace them once in a while because I don't want them snapping. It's kind of almost like a maintenance
And
item.
I was gonna say a lot of our stuff, like the 55, for being the kind of car that it is on an incredible maintenance program. Like when it comes back from a race, Dad works on it for a week, you know, with cleaning it up, maybe 2 weeks, like changing third members. Now we're going to be on a maintenance program of rods, you know, like we only get so many passes out of that with being aluminum. So this isn't something that we're saying like we throw in, and it's usually fine, but it's not like it's a bracket car, you know, that you put in and make hundreds of passes. We do check everything pretty frequently.
And we're very nervous about stuff breaking.
Yeah,
And so even like nothing's ever really broke. We had one lifter failure and maybe a spring.
But that was from like actual, like it was bouncing in. Like,
it was detonation.
Detonation. And then we also just skyrocketed to the moon on a rev limiter. So different things like that. But anyway, so I'm just saying that because that's something that we're very, very careful about is maintenance and checking stuff and catching stuff before it becomes an issue.
Yep, that's why this works since we're on that subject.
I was going to say, now another thing that could be controversial, there's different thoughts out there. We're just going with a timing chain, not just a regular.
It's controversial.
It is.
People are like, I'd give it a chain. I wouldn't have that chain. Blah, 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 blah. I gotta have a belt. I don't like belts.
Yeah.
Belts break. I see it way too often.
So the couple options that we could do is obviously a chain. We could do a gear drive. We could do a belt drive. We've seen belts fail.
I've seen more belts fail on drag and drive cars than I have chains.
A rock gets in there and it can jack your day up.
It's done.
It's bad. And then on the other hand, you've got gear drive. We've had some experience with those.
I've had on 2 drag and drives, 2 different cars. They both gear drives ate themselves.
Yeah,
and
so
they do. There's a lot of harmonics going on with the gear drive. It's fine for drag racing. Driving it on the street, it's pretty hard to do.
And once you get to like a different power level, like again, stuff will start to change.
Yep,
stuff will
everything
change.
changes.
Like eventually, will a motor that we do have that potentially? But we're just not like right now. We're trying to keep this at the most power we can make with the simplest combination to make our lives easier.
And one note on this, not just any timing chain will work. We always run a Z chain, which is a German-made chain, and
And
we actually
I was
broke.
Say,
So we had a I don't remember what it was. We had some kind of an issue that caused detonation. It wasn't a tune issue per se. It was a failed.
We had
something.
oil. And we had remember
It's
we
pumping
heard it
oil.
before. We were pumping oil into the cylinder.
Yeah, and it caused detonation, and we found lots of stuff. That's probably when that lifter and that spring got hurt.
Yeah.
But one of the things, Alex had the oil pan off, and she's just feeling around in the bottom of the oil pan just to see. And she comes up with this thing, says, "What is that? It looks like a washer. It almost looks like a little washer." Well, what it was the side of the timing chain, and it's very. We caught this just by the hair of our teeth. I don't know if I can get that open.
So it was one of those, it was like we caught it, we're like, oh man, but that does show that even with that, it still worked without.
There's so much, if it can do that and keep on going without actually breaking. So what it was you can imagine breaking the end of this link off right there, and this whole bottom part of it was laying in the oil pan. Well, we had made multiple passes, with that chain like that, and it just kept on trucking. That's a tough piece. So it can break. Anything can break.
And that is one of the things that we keep in stock. We keep changing stocks, and anytime, we do replace those frequently just to keep. Just to save.
That's cheap insurance. When you're in that motor, which we are, like you say, we come back and we go into it and we look at stuff. If I have any reason to be in there, I'll replace that chain.
Because it's just like, aluminum rods, they look fine until they're not.
Yep.
And it's one of those that you look at that chain, you're like, sometimes we actually do see stretch. You can actually see that the chain is sloppy.
And that's not very often with the Z chain.
No, but
it is once in a while.
Once in a while you'll see it, but other times it looks fine. But it's like, oh no, that's a cheap insurance. Let's go ahead and swap that out. So that is one thing that we do. Let's see. Total seal ring. We should talk about pistons first, probably, before we. Oh, actually, let's talk about this crank.
That's a nice piece.
This is a nice piece. It took a little while to get, but
so
it is
that's
a nice
SCAT
piece.
billet crank.
Yes.
You might not be able to tell by looking at it, but it's not a forged crank. It's a billet crank, and if you know what you're looking at, you can tell. There's nothing forged looking on it. It's all machined. So that came out of a round bar stock, which is really cool. I mean, it's being a machinist to some degree. I'm sure tail machinist. I look at that. That's art for me.
It's very cool. And this is from SCAT billet crank, 100% custom.
Yep.
And with that, we actually have some, different combination going on here because our journals are actually Hemi size. So
yep.
That's...
We upped the raw journals to Hemi, and that give them a little bit bigger. What is it? 200 thousandths, I think. I should have looked that up. I forget because I'm not used to Hemi stuff, but it's quite a bit bigger. I think it's 200 thousandths bigger than big block Chevy. The beauty of that is that means that on each side of that journal, there's 100 thousandths more material. Well, we went from a 4-inch stroke crank, which would, with a 4-inch stroke with a Chevrolet size journal, you'd have X amount of overlap between the rod throw and the main width. When you increase the stroke a 1/4 inch, you're taking that overlap away. Now you've got the crank pin and the main like this. Well, by increasing the journal, it does speed up bearing speed, but we're not a NASCAR, so we don't care so much. It brings 100 thousandths more back towards the center of the crankshaft. It helps that overlap. It strengthens the crank.
So we're trying, one of the things that we're trying to do this year too is, or with our new combination, is we think we had some crank whip or flex last year, and to make a long story short, we actually think that's what led into some of our, or what a big part of what led into some of our damage that we saw last year. We only had a 4 magnet pickup on our balancer for our crank sensor, and when you already have very low resolution like that and you have crank whip, we believe that that was causing it not to pick up where it was actually at reference wise.
Well, when you're up at the level we're at 5 pounds or something of boost.
High boost, yeah.
So when you're up at that level, 1 degree of timing can make a couple hundred horsepower difference.
Yeah.
So you can just think about it. If you've got crank whip, and that's how the ECU's having to calculate every 90 degrees, you can be off several degrees of timing, which is an issue. We won't get into that too much because that's, again, controversial.
It is.
But we're going to be on the safe side, and we're going to a 36-1.
Yeah, we got that from Holly, or MSD technically, but we did go to that, a different pickup, and our crank should be a little bit stronger. We also have a double keyway balancer and crank snout now. So. And
had we known when we did this, I would have put a Hemi snout on it, and probably would have put a spline snout on it. But that was
the crank. Actually, we ordered it last year. The end of last year. So that's one of those things that we ordered the crank in a different point in our idea of this. When we do the second crank, when we get ready to do the spare motor, that some of that stuff may change a little bit on that, but we will keep stuff like the rod journal and things like that. We'll keep that the same because we want to have, my whole goal this year, and we've talked about this many times, is you guys know, limit on parts. Like, it's hard to get parts. We want to have everything in stock. If not, totally ruins your season. So
you have to. Yeah.
We want all the motors to pretty much be interchangeable parts.
Okay, so.
Total seal. Yes. You want to talk about pistons first?
There's one laying out.
You got one out already. Okay. Now this is a nice piece. This is from Race Tech. Dad spent a lot of time with some of our other pistons, looking at them, going back and studying, and then he spent time on the phone. This is a piece that you can talk some about.
So I spent time on the phone with Jeremy from Race Tech, which is just wonderful help.
Very awesome.
I mean, the guy learned so much from him, but we had piston issues on that last motor, and I don't want to get into too many details, but there was some issues with the piston that Jeremy recognized. I sent them to him, and he dissected them. And I wanted to make some changes and upgrades, and Jeremy, he just hit all the numbers. Man, when I was talking to him, most of the time I'm talking to somebody, and it's not that I'm that smart, but I have questions. I question everything.
Yeah.
So it was like, I need answers. And most of the time you're talking to people and you get answers, and it's like you leave and you're just not that satisfied. I mean, it's like, okay, I'm going to do, but Jeremy had all the answers. So I'm really impressed with Race Tech pistons, and trust me, I've sat down for a long time looking at this piston, and I like everything that I see, and everything that he told me answered questions that nobody's ever answered for me before. So when you think a piston's a piston, it's really not.
It's not.
There's a lot of engineering that goes into this, and I like what these are.
It's everything from, your ringland to your pin height. There's spent a lot of time on that, making combination right. You got your gas ports there. There's so much to this, and we also are a little bit lower compression than you would think.
Normally.
Yeah, but that's one of the things that we found works good for the street.
When we say that we've done this for a long time, we have upped that compression constantly.
But at very small increments.
Small steps.
So yeah, these are very nice, and that's one of the things we actually decided. We talked last year about, should we just like rush to get this? We've done it. Should we rush to get this back together and make drag week? Last year was the first time in 10 years that I have missed a drag week. 9 for Dad. And it was weird, but we're like, let's just take time, slow down, and get the combination back to where we want it or where we want it. And being able to slow down, send pistons in, have Jeremy, race tech, look at them, analyze them, get answers. That's a big part of having this be a better combination.
And when you do it, you ask questions. Yeah. It's like the deck. The first thing that's so obvious, like when we had piston issues, you blew a hole in the piston and blew so much pressure, combustion pressure and turbo pressure into the oil pan, split the welds on the oil pan and filled the belly pan
That's what
up.
happened on the last pass.
Yeah, that's very dangerous. So first thing, obvious. Everybody has, everybody jumps to a conclusion. Oh my God, the top of the piston's too thin. Well, it really wasn't. That wasn't the issue. And I don't want to get into it, but you need to ask questions. So the deck on this piston is designed based on what I want to do, what Jeremy said we need to do. The ribs that are in here are placed just where we want them. The wrist pin's just what we want. The dampener groove in the second ring land. There's so much to this piston. I'm just blown away, and I feel so good about it.
I do too. And it's one of those. Dad actually got off the call and called me. He's like, "I feel good about that." That rarely happens, so that was exciting.
Really
but yeah, so that's one thing. And another thing, just got to mention this. That's a very common. After that pass, and people mean well, so I don't mean it like this, but the first thing they say is, "You think you leaned it out," and everybody always comes back to, is it the tune? If you guys saw the data from that tune, you would not believe what the motor looked like after that. Every EGT was happy and consistent. The plugs were probably the best we've ever seen.
But just before that pass, I had the plugs out, they were perfect.
Everything was so happy. So at that point, once you go through, like we sat and looked, it's like, it's not there. It's not in the tune. It's not there. You don't have something that runs and works good. I mean, if you're on the edge of something, but you don't have something that does that and then has a failure
without changing the tune.
Exactly. So
there is a limit to everything, and
everything's the fastest right before.
Ben Strader said, "Well, it's kind of like this. You've just figured out where the limit of a stock big block Chevy crankshaft is.
Yeah.
So there is limits to everything, and you just got to ask a lot of questions. But your first inclination is to jump to conclusions like leaning it out or detonation. And that's why I don't post too much on the internet, because everybody has an opinion about it. And that's the most obvious first opinion, first response. And it's rarely ever that. Rarely ever.
We ran that tune for, 5-6 passes prior, identical, and had no issue. And then that pass let go. Anyway, so that's just on that. Very, very happy with that. Race Tech's awesome, which also leads to Total Seal. They're the best.
Man, I love Total Seal. There's nothing in the world better than that. That is so good. And somebody told me I was old school with this. I don't remember who it was, but I'm a Total Seal ring. I'm a gapless ring guy. Yeah. We've never heard a gapless ring.
We have tried not going gapless. I think on
I
this
just don't
motor.
Like it.
Was it on this motor or my motor?
Whatever
one. The case was.
Your suit.
Yeah, it was like, nope, we're going back gapless. Very, very happy with these. And that's another thing that rings are not equal. Rings are not created equal. Off the shelf rings are not. Total Seal is very, very good at figuring out your combination and recommending the right stuff for it.
Kevin Studeker.
Yeah.
He's the best, man. He can tell you what to do, but they always work and they never have failure.
Yeah, so big fan of that. So those are going to be great. This is our Innovators West dampener here. This is nice because you can actually rebuild these. We actually hurt the hub when we hurt them last time. Send this in. We have them serviced. They have fluid in here. They go through the clutches and the fluid, service them, put a hub on it. We had it for a double keyway this time. And they also took the magnetic pickup front cover off. So very happy with that.
Yep, I love them. Super easy. And it's not even expensive to have it serviced.
No.
It's like you need two and keep one serviced all the time.
It is one of those that is cheap insurance.
And the reason for that is that if you score it, taking it on and off or whatever, like one keyway, there's lots of reasons to have it serviced, but I actually cracked the hub from doing it wrong.
When we were at Chicago at the NHRA race,
what a circus.
Never, ever would we have ever taken a spare hub or a spare dampener. We actually had a spare dampener, and it was a miracle because we cracked the hub taking it off at the race.
Yep.
Anyways, so everything else here pretty simple, but springs.
And those are another, we're talking about what we've learned over the years. Those PSI springs are the best. I
Yeah.
mean, they are so good. We replace them once in a while, and I've got boxes of them upstairs because I can't stand to throw them away. There's nothing wrong with them.
And it's one of those that we do check the pressures, and then we'll take them off. We also have a tool for on the head, but we'll go through and actually check and make sure. He's very tedious with that stuff.
We use what's called an ML Max Life, so it's kind of a polished spring versus a non-Max Life spring. I actually think I have some back here. So these will run and these are fine, but this is a standard spring for drag racing. That's great, but when we're driving thousands of miles on the street, these polished coils are, they're going to last longer. They don't have any kind of risers or any kind of imperfections in them. Not that these do, but they're not polished. So the polished part of it, the Max Life part, makes that a better spring for what we're doing than a standard spring. And I've never seen pressure drop in them that amounts to anything. In fact, I really don't ever see a pressure drop.
And that's kind of where I was going to get into is he does, like, we record it, check it, make sure, and you just like kind of monitoring. That's something we're gonna have to do with these aluminum rods, is monitoring if they stretch or lose pressure, and that's kind of how you can tell where you're at.
I've got right now today when I start, one of my first things is we've got to record a lot of data on those rods.
A lot.
So it's something that I really don't even want to do. I mean, it's like, but
So
here's the deal. When we take this bitchin' MGP billet rod out and we're ready to replace it because it's got enough passes on, it's going to look exactly like this.
Yeah.
There is nothing going to change, and you're going to throw that away, and it hurts.
it does.
It's just because I'm a conservative guy. I save every piece of scrap metal, aluminum I've got, and that rod's not going to change.
So that's the thing. So where we're going here, we are going with aluminum rods. They are, for the power level that we're getting to, this is one of those things that we did have to. We don't necessarily have to.
We don't have to.
Don't have to. We feel more comfortable switching to these.
The tune is supposed to be so much more forgiving with these aluminum rods. If you have any detonation, it's not transferring to that crank. And I've never
had a little scare there because we thought we lost that. Phone died. Anyway, so aluminum rods, as we were saying, swapping to that because it's easier, like tune-wise. If you do have detonation, these are a little bit more forgiving.
and they're stronger.
But I know what we're talking about. Basically, as far as they're going to look the same. They are going to look the same when it's time to replace them. Some people replace them at 40 passes. Some people replace them at 20 passes. Some people push them and
I even had a guy message me and say, I've got 430 passes on a set of these, and I talked to the guy at MGP and he said, that's just the most black magic thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Never try that.
So we are not doing that. We're going to start off, it's gonna, they do cost to replace, but we're going to start off low. We might make it through testing and stick week and pull it back out and, check rods. So one of the things that the guy from MGP actually said is that you can measure and see if they're changing.
Yeah.
So you can talk to that.
It's a pretty big deal. So I'm actually thinking about making a fixture. I spent some time last night in bed thinking about this. That's the way I do things. So you really need to know center to center length. And, I've got a really nice brand new set of calipers that I could measure that. It's not good enough. I mean, I need to know in the fourth decimal place.
Yeah.
And not that those won't do it, but to
You have
hold it square and what
human
have
error.
you.
Yeah.
So I don't have the fixtures and the equipment to measure that accurately. I'm not into splitting hairs, but I'm going to do that. I want to know the center length. I want to know this pinhole exactly.
Yep.
And it's not really easy to measure. That's a 1094 pin, and to get that exactly right, I don't really even have I'm going to use a snap gauge. So I got to come up with some ideas on that. But this rod will look perfect when we take it out and chunk it in the scrap bin.
Yeah, so part of the progressing, eventually we hope that we can get more more passes out of those rods, but starting off we're going to err on the side of caution. Again, cheap insurance versus...
It's not cheap.
It's not, well, I was going to say cheaper than actually doing some more damage. Rods are not cheap. But part of this is we're going to, this now becomes a consumable, and we're going to have to start off, because we talked to the guy from MGP, it's like, what's the number? There is no magic number. Every combination, everything is different. So we are going to start off on the side of caution, check, pull them out, and see if they change. And honestly, those rods aren't going to go back in. You know, even if they haven't changed, we're going to learn, okay, we could have got some more passes out of that, put a new set in, and do that until we, like, you know, bump up the number and then check again. So it's just going to be part of our program and learning.
The rods are crazy. I mean, I've learned so much, and I've got these same rods from 15 years ago in that Willys back there.
Yeah.
And what I know now, I just don't know if I'd even run those rods again. I mean, I used to would have, but I've learned so much about them. But it's just like these things come torqued, and when they're torqued down to the spec, there's a piece of paper in here that says do not leave them torqued more than 6 months.
Yeah.
What's that mean?
6 months from when?
So, but I went into overdrive. It's like, okay, these are torqued, and the box says that these are a year old.
And by going into overdrive, we actually considered not going to sick leave for a little bit, because we freaked ourselves out.
Yeah. So, is a bolt breaking? I mean, I've heard that story. I've heard that the bolts will snap and just fly out. Well, you talked to ARP.
I called Chris from ARP, and he was like, "That's not what happens." He's like, "You need to look for, you know, see if there's any signs of corrosion, anything like that on the bolts, and if there's not, those are okay. That's not what happens."
So there's a lot of stuff about that. I'm gonna leave it at that because I don't want you can stir up so
very
much controversy.
It's
really not. I mean, MGP will tell anybody what that's all about.
It's just there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation.
And very credible people have that misinformation. I mean, we talked to a bunch of people, and
some really good people.
You get a lot of different stories on what actually is the problem. Is it the bolt? Is it the material? Is it the
threads?
You get a lot of different stuff. So anyways, that is something. Moving on from that though, of course, we're going back with Isky lifters and an Isky camshaft. These are great.
The best in the world.
No problem. These are a bigger lifter. They're 937, so bigger than a stock big block, but we didn't do anything crazy and go keyway or anything like that. They're still tie bar. They're still pretty simple, and they work.
We talked about it, and there's people that, oh, you can't run a tie bar. Those things break. That's a blah, blah, blah. Well, they can. So can this, so can that, so can that.
So can a $15 part.
But this has never broke for us. We've never had issue. Knock on, that's wood under there.
We actually talked to Steve Morris about it too, you know, and talked to him. He's like, they're expensive for some applications, yeah, and you know, and even in his opinion, it was like just.
Steve, I noticed the other day on a video that he did, he was using tie bar lifters in an SMX.
Yeah, he's like, they work.
Yeah, so. There's no need to get crazy with them. But anyway, Isky lifters with their bushing in there is, man, it's just foolproof.
Yeah.
They just work so good.
Yeah. So, like we said, we've only seen one issue, and it was not the lifter's issue. It actually, to attest the lifter,
it broke the
shaft.
It broke
the shaft. That was from detonation, and we did not hurt a camshaft. We did not actually, we were able to catch that in time.
It hurt a spring that same time.
So
and we ran on that. And I think we broke a lock. We broke a lock, a spring, and a lifter.
Yep.
And that was from pumping oil and detonating that motor.
So that's actually kind of a testament to the product. I mean, we hurt one and we still were fine. But that was, again, not on the lifter. And then cam. So this is very similar specs to what our previous one was. We slowly changed stuff in the camshaft over the last, I don't know, couple years. And
I can say that you and I have put a lot of effort into camshafts.
A lot.
I used to think that when people say, oh, that's a secret, you can't know those numbers. When I bought the black car or got the black car in 07, it's like Steve wouldn't even give us the specs for that cam.
And it seems dumb at first, but it's not.
It's like, I don't want anything that I don't know everything about. So I wasn't happy about that. We know everything about this cam, but it's taken us 10 years to get to this camshaft right here, because we got a shelf of them up there.
Yep.
And for one reason or the other, we keep changing them. And the last ones that we've got, working with Nolan, which he's been really helpful, the last ones we've got brand new spares because they're so good. But with this whole thing, we're more cubic inch, we're more compression, we're going to be more boost, we're more injectors, we're going to be M5 instead of M1. Yep. Everything is just a little bit more, so it would have not made sense. Our camshaft is so conservative, you could drive it to California.
And this is one of those that, over the last couple years working with Nolan from Isky, we've, with his ideas and our ideas from actual experience, and his on his side, able to mix that together, and we found something that we're really happy with. So not switching that up, but if you guys want, you don't have to have all the black magic and trial and error. You can call Iski. They will get you a recommendation, and it will get you guys going well.
Yep,
So it's just we've had some refining over the last years from our own personal preference. We actually started this video and I said, Dad, we're not rambling. This is a 15 to 20 minute video. And if you've made it this far, good job.
Yeah, but it's good information. They should make it this far.
So
We also, one thing I want to touch on is if you notice that Moroso oil pump right there,
yes.
it's still a wet sump.
Oh yeah, we should talk about that. One more thing. Also, another thing that could be at the edge of having to swap, but we haven't seen a reason to yet. We did keep wet sump and we didn't go dry sump.
So some people say you can't be that kind of power level with a wet sump. It just won't work. It just won't work. And we may find that true.
We might.
But we were at almost this power level and it was still working fine. And I just, part of the appeal of our car, I think, is the simplicity of it. We could call it an everyday car if we wanted to. It drives, it does so good. It's just not a big old race car. It's not a 5.0 bore space billet motor. So it's very simple. I just didn't want tanks and hoses and belts and dry sump.
We don't have the room for it, and that's a learning curve. Like, we don't really have the time for that.
I don't have the time for it. I don't want a belt tossing off and smoking the motor, which we see way too often.
Yep. So for now, and as long as we can, we'll watch the data, we'll check everything. As long as we can, we're going to keep it wet sump. Will we potentially find that? We can't? Maybe. But until then,
here's the thing. When we go into it, we've never had a main bearing issue. We replace rod bearings every once in a while. Rod bearings are cheap compared to a dry sump system.
Yeah.
So I'll just replace bearings once in a while.
Yeah. So with that said, it's time to start building the motor. It is January 10th, and we have testing in Florida coming up in 10 days. 10.
I don't want to hear it.
It's actually not too bad because you've been doing
How much time do I actually have?
10 days.
We're golden.
Yeah, Dad's done a lot of work prior to this, getting the car cleaned up, maintenance on that side of it, so it's ready to drop the motor in. So yeah, 10 days. We're gonna go testing for 3 days. We're gonna go to Disney for a couple days, and then it's gonna be time to kick off Sick Week 2023 with a brand new combination.
Which is a little scary, but testing's gonna make it okay.
Yeah, we get to go test with Mickey Thompson. There's a track rental, and we're gonna go to that, and it's gonna be pretty cool. So looking forward to having the 55 back out, because when we had to put it up last year, we ran a 680. The windshield didn't blow in. I mean, we were doing good. 215
miles an hour.
Yeah, so we're very happy with it, and we think we've got a pretty good combination for the year.
Yep, I think we'll be good. If there's no unforeseen problems here, which I can't really imagine what that it will be, because I've already talked about deck height with Henson yesterday. I mean, I know my block clearances. I just don't know what it could be. I think we'll be able to put it together. I do have to machine a little bit on these rods. The new ones that you have ordered are pre-machined.
Yep.
But, there's a lot of stuff left for me to do. I got to check piston to valve clearance. I got to set the heads, the rocker arms up, all that stuff. But it's time consuming, but this is just Wednesday. This thing should be making smoke by Saturday.
You're good. So with that said, we will have lots of coverage. I know people have been wondering when 55 is coming back. 55 is coming back. Lots of coverage coming up with testing and racing and some good times. Big thank you to Summit for helping with this, the 55 build from the very beginning. But, this has been a work in progress getting this here, and there's tons of stuff on this table that they've helped us source and get for the 55. So
that's right.
Big thanks to them.
Big thanks to Race
Tech, SCAT, Crankshaft, AFR. They've been a really good partner for many years, and Iski, of course, and I know Total Seal. All great companies. Missing someone somewhere along the way, but they're all very big. Big components of this. So anyways,
it's a partnership, and we're really excited to have them all on board, and they're not on board accidentally.
Yeah.
They're the stuff that we want because it's proven.
Yep. So if you guys stay tuned, there'll be more, and it's time to get to work.
It is.
Got a lot to do. As always, be happy, go fast, and stay pretty. I will see you guys next time.